Well, Darya, I'm really excited about our conversation today, and first I want to congratulate you on Foodist. I'm not really prone to hyperbole, but this is really groundbreaking stuff. I think this is the best how-to on getting healthier that I've ever come across. So really, congratulations on
Thank
great
you.
great work. My pleasure. You know, clearly you brought a broad range of skills to bear on this that is rare. I mean, I think what really resonates with me as a physician is that you base it on science. You know, you understand the science, you've interpreted the science right, but maybe even more rare, you've translated that well for non-scientists to understand. Clearly a broad range of skills for this. And so I looked at your background to say, well, how did this all come together? And it's, you know, molecular biologist and then Ph.D. neuroscientist and now foodist. How did you get here from there?
Well, there's sort of two streams to the story, and then they merge and become summer tomato, and then they become foodist. So basically, I was on this science track at Berkeley at my undergrad, and I was learning biology and science and all that. And so I did get trained, and and I eventually moved to UCSF, did my PhD in neuroscience. So I had a very, obviously, very strong background in science, specifically biology and specifically the brain. On the other opposite end of my life, I grew up in Southern California. I was constantly on the beach. I was a ballerina. I was always in like pink little tights, and I try to describe this to people. I didn't feel like it was expected of me to diet. It was just normal. I never questioned. I never thought, is this right or wrong? It was like, I was a kid, I was 11, the first time I came into the kitchen for breakfast one morning and my mom was making a Slim Fast shake. And I'm like, I don't know anything, I'm 11, but I'm like, I see somebody making a chocolate milkshake for breakfast and I'm like, yeah. Awesome, that's rad. And I wasn't concerned about my weight or anything.
Right.
But my mom explained that it was to help her lose weight and offered me some. And from there, it was like Slim Fast every day, then like half a grapefruit every day. And, and then I became 12, 13, and I became very self-conscious in my body. And so I was just on this lifelong dieting track. And, Michael Pollan talks about it in his book, like I think it was In Defense of Food, how totally crazy like Americans have been for the last 25 years. And I was definitely like the poster child of that. I didn't eat fat at all in high school. I steamed vegetables and had rice and salsa for like every meal, but also, red vines and frozen yogurt and Slurpees and stuff that were horrible for me, but I thought were low fat and therefore fine. I was very thin. When I got to college, I wasn't as extreme. I wasn't doing the ballet anymore, but then I learned about Atkins and I cut out all carbohydrates. I just ate meat and cheese and eggs and like hot dogs for like every meal, and very few vegetables at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know much about nutrition. Anyway, I was just on this nightmare roller coaster. My weight would fluctuate from extremely low to big for me. I was probably at my highest, maybe 25 pounds higher than I am now. I didn't get on the scale much back then, so I don't know exact numbers. But it was just this constant battle, and worst of all, I was miserable. I remember once I was in college, and it was sort of a first day of a class, and it was this ice-breaking exercise. We all had to go around and say our favorite food, and I seriously said my answer was I don't like food, because like food was such a stressful thing in my life, and I hated it, that it caused me so much displeasure, and I was always in the gym and I was working out like a crazy person. So I never got because I was so good at the dieting and so dedicated to it and was disliked so many foods because they would make me fat or whatever, I was never really, really overweight. But like I said, my weight would fluctuate a ton depending on what I was on. So, but then I had the scientific training and I read Michael Pollan's book, and that just really woke me up. I realized how insane I had been for basically my entire life. And so I started reading the science, I kid you not, looking for the best diet. I'm like, okay, I'm going to find the best diet and and at least solve this problem. I'm smart enough to figure this out. I don't need Cosmo anymore. I can do this on my own. And what happened was I learned that no diets work, because that's what the science says. If you look at patterns of dieting, it tends to predict weight gain, not loss
Right.
over time. I mean, you can lose weight on any diet when you first start, and I always did. But over a year, the weight comes back and your metabolism's slower, and you develop these insane eating habits, and so you tend to overeat. And so when I realized that, I sort of had to take a leap of faith. The rest of the science was telling me it's really your overall pattern of eating that helps, that matters, less than like what you do for a few months, and less than any specific macronutrient. That whole foods were really important. I needed to eat more vegetables. I needed to eat 3 meals a day. I was like, really? I eat breakfast? I hadn't eaten breakfast since Swim Fast. I mean, I'd never eaten breakfast.
Right.
And so I sort of like took a leap of faith. And at the same time, like sort of a third arm of this story is that I just started getting into the food scene here in San Francisco, which was the first time in my life I ever actually learned to appreciate food, because the food is just mind-blowing here. And I didn't really know. When I was living in Berkeley and I was a broke student, I didn't really understand what good food was. And when I got here and I had some friends work in the restaurant business, I just had my mind blown. So all the three of those things came together, and I discovered that if I would to the farmer's market, I could eat the foods that were delicious, because that's where they come from. And they were really, really mind-blowing. Like a tomato, the reason my site's called Summer Tomato is because the tomatoes there are so ridiculously good. It completely, like, it was like one of my biggest epiphanies in my life. And when I started eating like that and eating more and eating better, I lost weight effortlessly. For years, I just kept, it was slow, but I felt great. I was looking great. My hair started getting thicker. My skin cleared up. I was sleeping better than I ever had. And I was eating more than I ever had and enjoying food more than I ever had. And it was such a revelation for me, this person who'd been dieting my whole life, fighting food my whole life, that my life was completely different now, and I finally had the body I wanted. And I was just like, people have to know this. So I launched the blog.
It's so awesome that I just funny how we kind of came to these same conclusions in similar ways, because when I started, and I wish I would have found Summer Tomato 4 years ago, because then I could have saved myself a lot of pain and angst as we developed this program. Because when I first started it, I had that same mindset that we had to, people had to diet. We had this very elaborate system where we identified calories in and calories out, and how you balance those, and it cost a lot of wasted time and money, and it wasn't working. And a couple of different types of patients that really changed my mind. One was the people that have gone through what you've gone through. I had so many. And it's almost usually always women that would come in and say, I'm spending hours on the treadmill. I'm eating, 1,000 calories a day of Slim Fast shakes and lean cuisine, dinners, and I'm still not losing weight. And I didn't know what to tell them. I didn't know, why that was. And then the other part of it was that there were certainly people that had great success on Atkins or South Beach or 𝐇𝐞𝐚𝐥𝐭𝐡𝐬𝐩𝐚𝐧𝐌𝐃 or other crazy diets there were, but they'd have short-term success. I'd see them one visit and I'd say, wow, you look great, your numbers all look really good, your cholesterol is great, your blood pressure is great, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing Atkins. But then when I saw them 6 months or a year later, they were back to where they started. So, but I had a few patients that would either they'd lose weight and keep it off, or they'd done it in the past and kept it off. And so I started asking them, well, how did you do this? How did you do this when nobody else can? And every time, it wasn't counting calories, it wasn't some restrictive diet. It was, I just started eating better quality food, and I started moving more. And so that's when I had this epiphany. Wow, this is the answer, and you obviously have come to that same conclusion.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, if you take it the next step farther, that's what I realized. So that was where I started when I started the blog. But when I first started blogging, I was still very focused on food, very high quality food. And then I realized from getting feedback from my readers and feedback from just myself, and realizing like what people need. Like, so when you're food focused, when you're diet focused, you start giving people recipes, you start giving people calorie counters, like all these things, right? I realized what people needed to do was figure out how to change their daily lives, their behavior every single day. And so I realized it for myself. And, I talk to people like a lot at work, and I'm watching what they do every day. And I always ask them why. Like, why is it so hard? They're like, oh, I don't have time. Oh, I can't afford it. Oh, I don't know how to cook. And it was like all these problems, and I was like, those are the problems. The problems aren't the carbs. I mean, that is a problem. But like, I still eat carbs now, way more than I ever used to, and I'm much, much thinner. And it's because it's about more than carbs. It's about breaking down those barriers that make it hard to eat healthy and eat right and eat good, especially because our society makes it so darn difficult. I mean, when you look around, everything is easier, faster, cheaper, you know, quicker, and it's just, it sets up the cycle where you believe with all your heart that you can't cook. It's too hard. It takes too much time. It's too expensive. I can't go to the farmer's market. I'm busy. And it's like, nobody's busier than me. And I was like writing a blog and writing a book proposal and getting my Ph.D. And I'm like, you know what, guys, like, there's time for this stuff. And really what it comes down to is just finding the little things you can do to get started and just build on that. And that's sort of why I ended up, you know, if you read Foodist now, like, there's several chapters on just behavioral change in your mind and how to deal with the psychology of changing your behavior, because that's really where it gets tricky.
Yeah. You know, I interesting, because I had that thought when I was reading this, that fundamentally Foodist is a training manual on how to form healthy habits. Would you agree with that? Absolutely.
That's what it is. People are always surprised. I surprise people all the time. People are always surprised there's only one chapter on nutrition, because it's really not that hard. Like, Michael Pollan told us this stuff already.
Yeah.
You know, we know this stuff already, and it's not. What's hard is doing it. And yeah, so it's exactly what it is. I mean, I should have hired you to help me write the inside cover, because I mean, it's a training manual to build healthy habits. The problem is that doesn't sound super sexy.
No, I know.
So, you know, I have to be really careful, and I know, and I have chapters in there on this as well with the words I use, right? Because if I write an article about 6 steps to healthier habits, guess who's going to click on it? Like 4 people who already believe in this stuff. Probably you'd click on it, but other people won't. Because so you have to, when you're talking to people, it's really important that you don't sound like mom telling a kid to eat her vegetables. And that's that's something that I actually learned because my primary medium is the internet. You know, like, I have 140 characters, including a link on Twitter, to get somebody interested in what I have to say. So, you know, that was a real learning process for me, and that's why I don't think Foodist would be as useful as it is if it weren't for the internet and the feedback I get from readers, and the fact that I know what people are interested in, and I know what problems they have, and I know how to solve them now that I've worked with them.
Right. No, that's just as an aside, that was one of the epiphanies in Foodist for me. As much as a lot of what you were saying, I'm like, well, that's really our message. One of them was your topical language of food, because I realized that I have 11 and a 12 and a 13-year-old kid, and the automatic way that I can get them to say ew is to say, oh, well, this is healthy, and I'm already starting to adapt those messages to try to get them more interested in eating better and eating healthy. Does it ever surprise you that your message of eat real food and move more is novel? I mean, doesn't it seem like that's just common sense? Like, shouldn't we all start with that and then move out? I mean, does it ever surprise you that this is new?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I don't feel like it's that new anymore. I feel like I would not be selling books at all if it was completely new, because it's...
No, good point.
I think, like I said, Michael Pollan has sort of figured this out. Jamie Oliver's another great one. He's out there telling people to eat real food and learn what real food's about and learn how to cook. So yeah, I think it's totally weird that even people who want to do it have no idea how to do it. Right. And I think it's largely because of just our culture. Like, I never learned. Like, my parents were actually pretty good cooks and ate pretty healthy, but because of my mentality and their mentality that, like, it just should be easier and that we shouldn't have to go through these, like, mundane things like cooking for ourselves and knowing what a turnip looks like, that it's sort of, that's what's, to me, that continually blows my mind, is how much I still learn every day about food, because I never grew up knowing this stuff. Nobody knows anything. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
no, and it's getting worse. I totally agree. Yeah. Now, how we've hit on this a little bit, but one of the things that I've really struggled with is that people understanding the message. They come to something like Achieve Life or to my office, and they're really focused on, well, I gotta lose weight to get healthy. And when I have the message, well, you know what, how about just eat real food? Don't worry about counting every calorie. Don't worry about the weight loss. Worry about just getting healthier, and then the rest will come. Have you had strategies or things? I mean, we talked about the words, but is there how do you get that message across to people that seem skeptical? And I also realized in your own book you said that when you first had this epiphany, you kind of had to take a blind leap of faith that it would work because it just seemed a little alien to you based on your past.
Absolutely. And it was really hard for me. I mean, not only was I scared that I would lose weight, but my habit was dieting. I dieted for, 15, 17 years or something before I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to eat oatmeal. This is terrifying. Yeah. And what I have learned, and I have to beat this into my own readers too, over and over and over again, is that diets don't just not work. They actually make it worse. They actually make it harder. And that whole chapter in there, my chapter 1 and chapter 2, which is about, so chapter 1 is just for those who haven't read the book yet, is about why dieting is just horrible. It's just like a horrible way to live. And chapter 2 is about willpower and how it doesn't actually work for food. Like self-control is great for getting a good job, for making it through school, for doing all sorts of things. Really, people with a lot of self-control do great. But they're not thinner than people with low self-control for the most part. And that's because willpower is dependent on blood sugar. It's one of the main reasons. Because your brain uses blood sugar as fuel, and it's very, very labor intensive, as you know. Willpower is hard, right? And so it causes, you're inevitably gonna stop doing the stuff that's painful. It's just inevitable. If you have a job that's stressful, if you have children, if you have to commute in traffic, there's like a zillion things that deplete your self-control and your willpower all the time. So to rely on that is a complete waste of time. The other thing is that dieters, like the dieter mentality, creates these weird relationships with food that actually prevent you from being able to control what you're eating. You think you're better at it. Like, I used to think I was better at it than most people, like controlling what I ate and knowing what I ate and being aware of how much I was eating, because I used to write it down like a maniac. I have a few of them. I have journals and journals and journals and journals of food, which are just like, they creep me out now to even look at them. Like, I was so obsessive about this stuff. And the problem is that what would happen is I would prevent myself from eating when I was hungry, right? That's what dieting pretty much is. And then your brain learns to stop responding to when you're hungry, and so you lose that. But the problem is you also learn to stop responding to when you're full. I don't know why. I don't know why that happens that way. Probably something to do with hormones. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just mental. I don't know. But dieters, there's plenty of research that shows that dieters are notorious for, once they feel like they've gone past their limit for the day, okay, I was supposed to have 1,400 calories today, but I'm going to eat this cupcake. What they'll do is they'll sit there and eat 3 cupcakes instead of 1, because they've been depriving themselves for so long, and they just say, they call it the what the hell effect. They're like, oh, what the hell? I've already blown it today. So they'll end up eating far more than even somebody who never went on a diet. So, I mean, it's making it worse. It's making it harder. You're going to gain more weight with this crazy mentality and this crazy relationship with food if you've been dieting. And so it was really hard for me to train myself to stop doing that. And I sympathize with readers, and I just tell them all the time. And that's why I spent so much time in the book talking about it, because if you come in with the mentality of, because this happens all the time. I get emails, or my friends tell me, they're like, I'm going to do your healthy eating stuff, but first I'm going to do Atkins for 6 months and lose the weight, and then I'll come to you and do for maintenance. But I try to explain, it doesn't work that way. You're wasting your time, and if you should just spend that energy, start building the habits now, because if you start, because you're going to have to start back at square one.
Right.
And in the meantime, mess up your brain and your metabolism and all sorts of other things. So that's how I tell them.
Yeah, I love your point in the book when you said, like, I'm paraphrasing, but you said, like, thank goodness that all this restrictive diets and wacky stuff doesn't work, because otherwise we'd have to do it, and so I thought that was a brilliant point. And I like you, I've been really struck by the newer information on willpower, and I loved that you put in there, I think it was from Switch, from the Heath brothers, the idea of the executive brain and the emotional brain and the writer and the elephant, because I think that's one of the great analogies out there. It just made it all so easy to understand, and I think it was great that you put it in the book to explain why these things are so hard.
Yeah, picturing trying to control an elephant as like so those who haven't read the book, the elephant is like your emotional drive to do things, your emotional brain, and then you have the rider is your executive brain. It's like it can steer, but it's really not strong enough to control the elephant. So the elephant's probably going to win unless you guys both have the same goal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And we know that from our own, I think you and I have similar, a similar background where a lot of the things that we had success in life was through just brute, pounded out, like there's no way I'm not going to be able to get through this surgery rotation. I don't care how sleep deprived I am or whatever. And yet that's not, that strategy just doesn't work. And I take care of a lot of really people that are really successful in life, either money-wise or fame-wise or whatever else that they've accomplished. And it's interesting to see how many of these really talented people are struggling with eating healthy and doing the right things.
Yeah, like Oprah, right? Yeah. The Oprah paradox, because she's like the
exactly. Awesome. Yeah, great example. Yeah, great example. What are your thoughts on this? Is a big topic of conversation around my division, because we've recently had Dr. Campbell, who wrote the China study. He came for one of our grand rounds, and we also had Dr. Esselstyn, who I don't know if you've read or seen him, but he wrote the book Preventing Heart Disease, and they're both strong advocates for this plant-based diet, which I'm all for, eating a lot of plants, although they're like no oil, no nuts, no avocado. It's a really tough diet. Like one of my patients, he'd gotten the strong sell from one of my colleagues about this diet, and he says, doctor, I may not live forever on that diet, but at least it'll feel like forever, and I thought the same thing. But then on the other hand, I have these people that are, like a friend of mine, he's an ER doc, and he went on the paleo diet, and he lost 35 pounds. He's it was 2 or 3 years ago, and he's kept that off. And then there's the Mediterranean people. What's your take on it? I thought you did a really nice job in the book of kind of, addressing those issues. But what's your take on these diets and how people are just really emotional about them? People
are very emotional about it. It's like, I say it's like religion. Like you just, if somebody has a food belief system and they're very dogmatic about it, you pretty much just shouldn't talk to them about that topic, because you're going to fight and it's not fun. My general take is, first of all, if something is working for you, awesome, you win, right? Like I would never tell somebody if something's working for them not to use it. But I think that these diets that are very extreme, like I think a vegan diet is very extreme. And I think a paleo diet actually can also be very extreme, because there's no rice, there's no lentils. Try telling somebody from India or China that they can't have rice and lentils. I mean, it's just, or soy. It's just, it's not for everyone. And so I try to just propose a more moderate take on things and point to the good things of all these diets, which is that vegans, because they have to, there aren't a lot of food options if you're not eating meat or dairy. Right. That you just need to eat a lot more whole foods. And the same thing, I love the paleo philosophy of, eating natural whole foods. I think they take it a little far. Like I eat grains and beans and I'm doing great. Like I don't have heart disease and all my levels are awesome. I had them checked recently. So I think that there is room for these things, and I don't think you need to be so extreme, but I think what they all have in common is that they focus on whole foods. And on the flip side, Colin Campbell is an interesting one, right? Because he doesn't actually think that it's the fat in the food that is causing all the
protein.
problems.
Yeah.
Cancer, he says. He thinks it's the protein.
Right.
But, you know, he definitely agrees. All these people agree that processed carbohydrates, so refined flour, wheat, corn, and sugar, like that those are bad for you. Like there's no diet in the world that says those are not bad for you. I mean, even the super low fat people say, well, you can't eat junk even if there's no fat in it. So, you know, that's my take. My take is that if we want to take all this advice, and you know, and people will lose weight on any of these diets. But if you want to optimize your own quality of life and you really want to stick with it, which is my goal and the goal from my readers, and to be able to travel and eat natural cuisines in different places around the world and just enjoy food, I take the best of all the worlds and then modify from there. So, you know, I definitely have talked to people that really need to be careful with carbohydrates because let's say maybe they're insulin resistant already and they need to, you know, sometimes you do need to go low carb for a little bit just to get to regulate those hormone levels. But for the most part, once you're sort of moving in the right direction, I think that whatever works, you know, you just have to figure out on yourself what works because no study's ever going to tell you what works for you, right?
Exactly.
Like it'll tell you what works on average or what is more likely to work, but it's not necessarily going to tell you if you do better with more protein or more carbohydrates or whatever.
Yeah, and nobody's average, you know. I love how you came to that conclusion because this was an experience I had in January. I got there's this meeting in Hawaii that's all electrophysiologists, which is these are kind of the Star Trek, you know, guys of the Star Trek nerds of cardiology. They're really into the electrical system of the heart, and they've had this meeting for 20 years, and it's all electrical cardiology stuff. But they invited me to come speak about prevention because they wanted to broaden their focus, which I thought was really exciting. But one of the really cool things that they also added in this meeting was a 3-hour symposium on healthy diet. And so they got the first guy up, and he's a cardiologist, and he said, well, low fat, you know, that's the diet that you have to eat. You got to minimize fat. And then the next speaker was Dr. Campbell, and he says protein's the bad stuff. I mean, you got to stay away from protein. And then they had Gary Taubes from, you know, the New York Times guy, and he says sugar is out, right? You know, no sugar. You got to really. And so I'm like, well, you know, I guess we have alcohol left, you know, which is not a bad thing maybe, but probably not the most healthy diet. But that was exactly the conclusion. Like at first, when they went to the discussion, the audience was really kind of angry. I mean, there were some irritated people saying, look, if you guys are the experts and you guys are just so diametrically opposed, how are we supposed to figure this out? But as the conversation evolved, everybody agreed it's processed food. You know, that's really the death stuff out there. That's what's killing us. And I, you know, as I talk to people that are just so passionate, I mean, very extreme in their opinions on this, and you know, you worry, okay, well, I can't talk about what I had for dinner last night around this guy because, you know, he's gonna, you know, chastise me. But what I realized is that you know, all of these diets really are pretty healthy because, as you said, they eliminate processed foods. You know, whether it's a Latin diet, an Asian diet, Mediterranean diet, you know, paleo diet, plant-based, vegan, vegetarian. If you're avoiding processed foods, you're doing the right things, and then you can kind of tailor it to what works for you, I think.
Right, and I would also add that, like, and I think that scares some people because they're like, but I like cupcakes. And I think that it was important to note is that really, like, a little bit of processed food isn't going to kill you. The problem is that we eat 80% processed food and maybe, like, every once in a while throw some, like, lettuce on our hamburger.
Right.
If we just flip those ratios and eat the real processed food most of the time, then on weekends you can have your cupcake. And you can still lose weight even. Like, that's what's, I think, important to help people realize is, like, this isn't, like, it quickly, again, becomes mom, like, telling you not to eat this and that, and you know, but like there's real enjoyment here. And on top of it all is that the processed food, if you get the good stuff, like if you're shopping at farmers markets, if you're buying fresh, if you're buying local, and you're cooking for yourself all the time, or even eating at restaurants that have, you know, use that philosophy, which are becoming far more common, the food you're going to be eating is absolutely delicious. I mean, night and day. Like, I don't want the processed food anymore because to me, I can just taste that bland. It's like, and I can almost guess how much sugar and like fake processed oil and salt is in there, and then they change the textures using those things, and it's like they all taste so generic to me now that I'm like, it doesn't even taste good. Like I would much rather eat a salad that I made at home with the ingredients that I know are, high quality, and it's a salad. And the reason it tastes better than like a crappy like little dessert pie from the grocery store. So, that's where you win, right? You win if you love the salad and you don't want that other thing. And that's sort of when you do cultivate the habits, I think that's what you end up with, is you're no longer tempted to go back. Like that whole willpower is just out of the equation completely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know that from my own, a couple of months ago, I was in Las Vegas, and I had to make a talk in like 25 minutes, and there was nothing that I could eat in that period of time, and I was starving. And so I went to McDonald's of all places. I haven't been at McDonald's in probably 10 years, but and I got a sausage or an egg McMuffin or something like that. That's probably not too bad, right? I took 2 bites out of it and I spit it out. I just couldn't, it just tasted horrible to me. But on the flip side of that, I'm from New Mexico, and so if I get, chips and salsa or Mexican food, I mean, I know it's not the healthiest part for me, but oh my gosh, I can't eat that every day, but when I get a chance, I love it.
Me too. Yeah, I'm from SoCal, and my family, actually half of them are Mexican. So tortilla chips and salsa and guac, that's my favorite foods. But yeah, like you said, like I don't eat it every day. I don't make chips at home, and I usually cook at home. So I never buy chips or anything like that. So I end up, when I do have it, I enjoy it. And people talk about moderation. Like I don't even do moderation. Like I don't eat as many chips as I want because I don't do it very often. I mean, that's the moderation for me, is like that 90% of the time I eat healthy, and then if I want to go nuts for like Super Bowl or Cinco de Mayo or something, like I don't worry about it, and I don't have to worry about it. And actually, what'll happen is if I eat too much one day, I won't be hungry the next day. Like my body just sort of figures it out, and my weight never fluctuates more than like 2 or 3 pounds. It's awesome.
Yeah,
so
and
awesome.
And you're eating what you love and doing exactly what
you never feel deprived.
I think that's exactly the message, and it's not an easy thing to convince people of, but once you get it, it's you can't imagine it being any other way. One thing that I really liked also in Foodist was you talking about mindfulness, and mindfulness is a word that I've heard for a long time, but I really avoided it because I'm a cardiologist. I like real science. I like the ejection fraction to be 50%. I want the stenosis to be 90%. I mean, I like, hard and fast things, and I thought mindfulness was really too touchy-feely, for me. But I heard a physician came in and gave a lecture on mindfulness and really struck a chord with me. And I not only like, wow, this could really help people, but I also realized for myself, I mean, I do 12 things at once. I don't even eat without a newspaper or a computer in front of me or something, like that. And I started adapting some of these things of mindfulness and realized how powerful it is. Can you talk a little bit about mindfulness? Like, how did you come to this and its importance?
Yeah, so that is one of those other things that I was not talking about on Summer Tomato right off the bat. And I'm like you. Like, to me, that was just like, I don't know. I don't know. People like that stuff, but that's not me. I'm a scientist. Come on, guys. But a couple things made me start thinking about it more. The first, I think, and this is sort of more involved in how I operate as a human who's intellectual. One of my best friends in the world, his name is Dr. Adam Ghazali, and he's a professor at UCSF. And he studies distraction. And I used to work, actually, when I was at Berkeley, I worked in the lab and we worked on this stuff together. So he studies distraction and how and interference and how it impacts our, not just like how we feel, but our actual productivity. And he's been studying this for 10 years now, and what he's found, like absolutely conclusively, is that we pay a price for task switching. And I learned, like, if I was I turned in my book 9 months early. Like, you can't do that if you're flipping back and forth between Facebook and Twitter and all the things that I love and use religiously. But you really, if you want to get into something and you really want to do your best work, mindfulness and being, well, not just mindfulness, but just being aware and staying on task, being aware that there are distractions out there and that you're going to suffer if you let them impact your life, was a big revelation for me. And I tripled my productivity. Like, I'm not even kidding. Just by closing my stupid email. Like, I would give myself like 10 minutes of email in the morning, and I would just read it to see if there was anything pressing. And I would turn it off, not just minimize it, you know, not like leave the tab open, just turn that stuff off. Again, just like check social media and then turn it off, and then just work. And so I just, this was really a revelation to me. And I started thinking about it more. But, you know, when you first do this, it's actually very difficult. So anybody who's practiced
absolutely
any sort of mindfulness knows how difficult it is. And that sort of tells you something, right? It tells you that it's a habit, and that, you know, you're going to have to spend some effort to break that habit if you want to get the benefit of not being so distractible. So that was when I started paying more attention to meditation, which is basically just a practice of doing this so that you're better at it. You know, it sounds like some, like, you're trying to reach nirvana, like ethereal, like religious thing, but it's not. It's just a practice for your mind to learn how to focus and be more productive. So I started reading more about this, and then I just started sort of more naturally applying it to food. I had a guest post actually by a woman who's also a neuroscientist who wrote about it a bit. And, you know, and there's other, you know, the mindless eating, like the stuff we talked about before with the sort of the distractible environment that's getting us to eat more than we should. All these things just sort of started converging for me, and so I started focusing more on that data. And it just turned out that I don't chew. I learned this, or like my natural inclination, and I think that's one of those dieter things too. Like, I used to just inhale food, but I learned that when I did chew, I enjoyed my food more. Win, right? And I would eat less, also win, you know, and feel more satisfied with less food, which is just, you know, I think that can be really powerful, because especially if you're going to be doing things like allowing yourself to have a cupcake whenever you want, you know, and even if what you want is less, you don't want to be that person who has 3, because that's not going to help. You can have 1, and you want to enjoy it. So I started using it myself, and I realized how powerful it was, but also how difficult it can be. And so one of the things I do on Summer Tomato is try to give people, and in the book Foodist, is try to give people tools to make that easier and to demystify it, you know, and make it feel real and not like something that is sort of, you know, this hippie hand wavy thing without actually any data behind it. The data on people who practice mindfulness and who can really cultivate that in their lives is off the charts. I mean, these people can lower their own blood pressure, their body temperature. They can, you know, they have better working memory. They're happier. Like, there's a zillion reasons to do it.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, and actually I started based on, after reading Foodist, I started paying attention to how much I chew, and I realized that I was just, you know, I wasn't a fast eater, but I didn't chew. I would not just shovel it in, but the chewing part it was a big deal to me. And I also loved your point about that, you know, eating, you know, foods that have a lot of fiber, you know, like legumes and stuff. Chewing that can help you if you've had, you know, stomach issues from that. I've never considered that. I mean, you know, I have to tell you, my wife and I have read Foodist, and we've gone to, we call you the Great Darya around our house, because there's like several times a day we'll say, well, you know, Darya said this about that. So you know, it really has made a huge impact on us, and I know for a lot of other people. You know, another thing that we had adapted a couple of years ago that I was just really pleased to see in your book was the home court. You call them the home court meals. We, you know, this was a few years ago when, you know, we're both physicians and we had young growing kids, and there were just, I mean, a lot of nights where we were just so overwhelmed, you know, and like, oh, last second, we got to get food on the table. Well, you know, let's just get something to go or take out or whatever. And somebody that I saw talk said, you know, I just have the ingredients for some meals that I really love that are simple, and I have those ingredients on hand all the time that I can make those faster than I can go for fast food. And so we did that, and it worked so well for us. You know, I'm guessing that you've had the same experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I realized was one of the barriers for so many people, because, you know, people are awesome. Like, people work hard. You know, they have busy lives. They spend all day using all their creative energy and all their intellectual power at the office, and they come home to their family, and you know, if you're like that's that willpower thing again. You're done. Like, you're totally depleted, and you're hungry, right? It's dinner time, so you're low on blood sugar on top of all that.
Right.
So I just realized that people think it's too hard, and I've been in that same situation. You know, I come home, I'm like, gosh, I should just go get a burrito, because you know, in San Francisco they're like on every corner, and I love burritos, like we talked about. So, and I just realized one day, I actually did it one day. I went and I called in the burrito. I walked down there. I still had to wait in line for like 15 minutes. By the time I got home, you know, it had been half an hour, maybe 35 or 40 minutes before I was actually eating. And I thought I was being faster by not waiting for a table. And, you know, the next time I was like, you know what, I don't really have anything, and I'm starving, but I was like, I don't even want to go wait in that stupid line. So I was like, I'm just going to scramble some eggs and and like cook a little bunch of kale. And it was 5 minutes. It was delicious. You know, I can cook this in basically 5 minutes. I mean, I just rinse the kale super fast, chop it up, throw it in a pan, it takes 2 minutes to cook, put it on a plate, cook the eggs in the same pan. Eggs cook almost instantly. And I had my food, I ate it, it was delicious. After, you know, it doesn't sound as satisfying as a burrito when you're starving, but I was actually really glad that I didn't have like a 1.5 pound burrito sitting in my stomach. And I was like, that was the moment when it clicked for me. I was like, this is easier. It cost me, by the way, the burrito is like $8. Yeah. 2 eggs and a bunch of kale is like $3 max. $2.50. Not $2.50. That's for really expensive eggs too. And you know, and I was just like, this is what you need. And when you can, you know, if you have a handful of recipes, and I call them home court recipes, as your home court habits. When you have those recipes as your base, and then you can get creative if you feel like, you know, like, oh, I don't want to have the same roasted cauliflower again. I love it, but maybe if I add instead of curry powder, I use 5-spice and make it kind of in like a little ginger or cilantro on top, and you know, and if you can just do little things like that instead of feeling like you have to come up with a whole new meal and, you know, reinvent the wheel. It's like intellectually and like mentally, it's just such a, you know, you break down that barrier and make it much easier for you to actually make the right decision, which I think is always the hardest part, is the breaking down the barrier to make the right decision.
Well, I think that's the strength of your book, as we talked about earlier, is that you emphasize that. It's not depriving yourself. It's just putting yourself in situations where you're going to more likely make the choice that you enjoy. And once you start making those choices, you realize, wow, this is great. You know, this really helps. I also liked, even though you call it Foodist, maybe you could talk about what Foodist means, because there's more than food to Foodist, and I really, you know, like that you emphasize the importance of regular physical activity, and I know you recognize that, you know, the benefit. I grew up really athletic. I played all the sports when I was in high school, but then in college we played, you know, everything. But medical school, I studied all the time. I mean, you know, I still distinctly remember my highlight of my week was to eat dinner and watch The Simpsons on Sunday night, and so I had no time for physical activity, but I got away with it, you know, because I was younger and you know, I'd had good, you know, physical activity before. But then once I got older, I realized, oh man, I got to start doing something here. I got to start being more physical active. And at first it was hard to get started, but now if I have an injury or I'm traveling and I don't get to work out or to be physically active, I'm miserable. So talk a little bit about how, you know, important physical activity is in your life, and how important that is for Foodists.
Yeah, so this starts back again with the science. Like, there is just, like, food is really important, and for most people, just starting to work out and not change your diet, you're not going to lose weight. Yeah. Because it's you get hungrier. There's good data on this. The issue with physical activity, though, is that it's probably the most important thing you can do for your health. And when I made the mental change in my head that I was not just a dieter anymore, that I wanted to be a healthy person, I started looking at exercise in a completely different way. I used to just sit on a treadmill and just run as far as I could. Like that was, I literally would spend 2 hours every day at the gym. During grad school, I'd get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym and spend 2 hours just so I could burn calories because I knew I'd be in lab all day. And, but I stopped doing that so obsessively in that way. But when I started approaching exercise as something that would make me healthier, there was a couple things that really are important there. The first is just not being sedentary. So if you have a job, like most of us do, when you're sitting in front of a computer, or I was in lab, I was writing, I was like the worst. I was sitting all day. It's bad, whether you go to the gym or not. The gym is actually not enough. Exercise, and I'm just talking like running down to the gym, doing half an hour of cardio and like maybe some weights. It's not enough to get you to 10,000 steps a day, which I think is really a game changer in terms of maintaining your weight. So I recommend everyone get a pedometer because it's really easy to lose track and to not realize. It's easy to get to the 10,000 steps if you're aware, but if you're not aware, it's very easy to fall short of it. So I recommend everybody get 10,000 steps a day. And, but I do actually also encourage the gym if you have time and the inclination or some sort of other activity. So I recommend cardio a couple times a week at least, just to get that heart rate up, because that's so good for you. It's so good for your heart. It's so good for your body in general. And, it feels really good. Like you said, once you get in the habit, that exercise is one of those habits that is really hard to break. Once you're in a good groove and you're fit, because for most people that's the hardest part. The hardest part is that they're not fit, so they go to the gym and they torture themselves and then they're miserable and they stop, but they don't stick with it long enough to become actually fit. You don't have to torture yourself. Just do something do a little bit of something to get your heart rate up a couple times a week. And then for those interested in going above and beyond, I have had just unbelievable results personally, and I've seen it in others with strength training for two things. One is it just your metabolism. My metabolism just skyrocketed.
Yep.
Because I'm a small frame girl, but I work out all these new muscles on my back, my legs, my abs, and I eat a lot now. I eat probably double what I was eating when I was dieting and heavier. I eat well over 2,000 calories a day, and as I attribute largely to strength training. I also look way better. Even when I was really, really, really thin, when I was in ballet and was not eating any fat, and I would basically only eat when my dad made me. When I still was I still wasn't happy with my body because I was flabby, and even though I was dancing, I don't know, there were parts of my body I didn't like. Now, even if I gain a couple pounds or lose a couple pounds, the shape of my body just looks great all the time because of the strength training, because, that tone is there. And I think anybody at any size is going to look better with some muscle tone. It's just true. So,
yeah.
if you do have that, we all have our vein streaks, and I've got my vanity issues as well, obviously. That's why I'm blogging about nutrition. But, if that's something that you're concerned about, I definitely recommend strength training.
I totally agree with you. For one thing, I talk to my patients a lot about how exercise is a fountain of youth. When you talk about everybody that I see that are in their 80s and even 90s, if they're in good shape, they're aging successfully, I ask them, well, how active are you? And invariably, they say, I'm active. I've always been active, or I started being active after I retired, or one of those things. The other thing that I think is sorely missing, particularly among women in my patients, is my patients who are women is resistance training. They're spending hours and hours on the treadmill. They're not getting where they want to, and they're afraid of the weights because they think, oh, I'm going to bulk up, I'm going to look like, I'm going to look manly, and that's absolutely not true. So you're an awesome testimonial. There you go. The last thing is that I love the technology that's available now and how that can help us not only monitor our progress but also see how that progresses over time. When I got my Fitbit, it was life-changing for me, really, because what I found out was at that time somebody would say, well, how much are you running? And I'd say, well, I run 2.5 miles a day at the time. And then I got the Fitbit and I realized, you know what, I'm not running 2.5 miles every day. I have early meetings, I have these things, I'm going 3 or 4 times a week. And because of that Fitbit, and I could see those numbers, I hated having holes in my day and my week. I hated So I would get my lazy backside up at, earlier in the morning when I had early meetings and stuff, because I did not want to miss out on those days, and it was a real motivator for me. Plus, I had like colleagues and friends on my list, and
Yeah.
I didn't want them to beat me. I was like, that guy's not going to beat me this week, and so
Yeah, I compete with my husband.
yeah, that's what my wife and I do the same. Although I say she's cheating, I think she puts it on the dog sometimes, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah, and then the withing scale too has been something that I have really found to be helpful. I just love it's totally mindless. I just put the device on, or I just get on the scale and it automatically pops in. And we use both of those devices on the Achieve Life thing, where they automatically connect to the Achieve Life account. So I found that to be really powerful.
Yeah, I think they're fantastic. People are scared of scales, and I don't blame them. I get on a scale, I don't know, maybe 3 times a week. I'm not obsessive about it, but just having that accountability, and also it's more than that. It's not just, like I say in the book, it's not just a guiltometer, right? It's a data point, and when you approach your health as something that is unique to you and something that is an ongoing process and that you can learn and get better at it, then you need as many data points as you can to understand what the problem is, right? So I have talked with people who can very clearly mark, like when they're like actively trying to lose weight, can very clearly watch themselves lose weight Monday to Friday, and then they come back in on Monday and they're like, oops. And they were aware enough that to be able to, because they had that data, they could make the change and be like, if I just have one less brunch on the weekend, or just make a better choice, if I just have an omelet instead of the French toast, on one of the 2 days out of the week, or, maybe stick with wine instead of drinking the cocktails, then I only gain 1 pound on the weekend, and I actually make much faster progress down the line. So I think, especially if you're new to Foodist and you're starting to make new habits, and you do want to really, like, honestly not deprive yourself, but you need to know the consequences of your actions. And I think monitoring, tracking, it's also a really rewarding thing too. If you once you do find a way to make progress, to see, like I actually got an email this morning from Fitbit telling me I did 86,000 steps last week. That's awesome, because Kevin only had like 57. Yeah. So, and having the scale, and I have friends that just show me their graphs with pride, their withings, weight drop loss, and that's a really cool thing. It's a really great motivator for the elephant who doesn't like to work hard but does like to make progress.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. I found that same that same experience in the people, and it's funny about the scale, because when we started working with this web developer to kind of have the Achieve Life idea blossom, and they're all guys, and they love the scale. They think the scale is the coolest part of the program, whereas all the women say, yeah, I'm not crazy about the scale. And my wife, who is a physician, and she's thin and healthy and does all those things, but we've been doing this for 2 years now, and she has yet to weigh herself on the withing scale. So I see your points on that. That's really great. Well, I could talk to you all day, but I know you're a really busy person. So I just want to ask one last question, and I think every person in America should be reading Foodist. I mean, the whole country would be healthier, and yet it's really hard. These crazy diets that we all know don't work in the long run seem to be at the top of bestseller lists, and what something that's so great like this is Foodist. What can we do to get that message out there more? What do you think is important?
It's really tough, and first of all, just selling books is tough, and it's really tough to make healthy eating sound sexy. It's not this magic quick fix. It's not, you're not going to lose 20 pounds in 3 days. I'm not selling that, and so a lot of people don't want to hear it. But what I try to do when I'm talking to media or trying to get the message out is I focus on the stuff that's really cool. Like, I love talking about the brain, because people are like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And those are my posts that tend to do really well, my blog posts that tend to get more shares and get more likes are the ones that are a really unique angle on something that people thought they already knew. Mm-hmm. So, right. You know, I just keep talking about the brain and, you know, the mindfulness, just those little hooks, and, you know, hope that at some point, like, the right people get it in their hands. And, you know, we're still pushing on the PR thing. Yeah. But yeah, no, I want everybody. I mean, that's the reason I wrote the book. I want everybody to read it because I want everybody to stop suffering. And right. I just wish I had it when I was a kid. You know, when I was 17 and like hating myself because I ate something that I felt like I shouldn't eat. You know, and it's just, yeah. I appreciate your help. I appreciate your help.
Well, you know, we bought 10 books and we've already given them away, so we're going to buy 10. You know, we're just going to keep promoting it because it really is a phenomenal book. And I know at the end of the day, there's probably days where you're, you know, say, wow, that, you know, all this effort and, you know, and things, but you're changing lives. Yeah, I mean, this is really groundbreaking stuff, and so I'm really grateful that you took the time to talk with me. I hope you continued great success with what you're doing, and if you know, if there's ever a chance that we can help you spread the message, please let me know.